Millionaire rejected, pregnant wife's baby mistress was hiding a secret child. They say money can buy anything: comfort, power, admiration, but what happens when it's the very thing that tears a family apart? In a glossy, glass-walled penthouse overlooking the city lights, an unexpected storm was brewing. Christopher Carlyle, a charismatic millionaire with a reputation for aggressive business deals, believed he had everything figured out. He had prestige, the finest suits, and a penchant for expensive toys. But beneath the surface of his illustrious life lay secrets that could shatter that gleaming facade. Little did he know, the unborn child he cruelly rejected wasn't the only one about to change his life forever. Christopher Carlyle was born into a modest household in Southern Virginia. Raised in a cramped apartment above his grandparents' garage, he grew up envying the lavish lifestyles he saw in magazines. His father was a mechanic, whose hands were forever stained with engine oil. His mother took on shifts at a local diner, serving eggs and coffee to regulars who never seemed to tip enough. From an early age, Christopher had one burning ambition: to escape poverty and build a legacy so enormous that no one would ever dare question his success. By his 20s, Christopher had immersed himself in the world of finance. He was a brilliant mind at Redwood Investment Group, a name widely recognized across the financial sector for its towering offices on Wall Street. People twice his age were confounded by his determination and unique sense of strategy. He was soon raking in immense profits, admired by many and envied by more. Through a series of shrewd stock acquisitions, he turned his modest savings into a goldmine. By the time he hit 30, he was no longer just an employee at Redwood, he was a partner. With wealth came grandiosity. He purchased a sprawling estate on the outskirts of Manhattan, a modern fortress with a marble driveway and meticulously trimmed hedges. Beyond the gates was a circular fountain with a statue of Neptune in the center, water shooting skyward like triumphant heralds celebrating Christopher's success. Inside the mansion, the floors were polished ebony, the windows soared floor to ceiling, and a private elevator led to rooms brimming with priceless art. The house boasted an indoor pool, private cinema, and a rooftop garden. Everything was custom-made to reflect Christopher's refined yet ostentatious taste. His personal life seemed equally captivating on the surface. He was married to Sophia Whitmore, a former model hailing from a well-off New England family. The tabloids called them a picture-perfect couple. Tall, elegant, and with a graceful smile, Sophia exuded warmth everywhere she went. She was the type of woman who could light up a room simply by entering it. Their wedding at the Plaza Hotel in New York City was the talk of the year. Celebrities and business tycoons rubbed shoulders at the reception, enjoying an elaborate feast and dancing under a twinkling display of chandeliers. Picture after picture appeared on social media, capturing the unity of two apparently perfect individuals. But as the months turned into years, Christopher's ambition was unstoppable. He traveled extensively for business, spending more time in executive lounges and private jets than at home. Sophia, somewhat naive in her endless devotion, believed his absences were necessary for a better future together. She yearned to start a family, to fill their massive home with laughter and the pitter-patter of tiny feet. For a while, Christopher indulged the idea, nodding absent-mindedly whenever she brought up children. Yet deep in his heart, fatherhood remained a vague prospect, an optional status symbol rather than a genuine desire. Nevertheless, after 3 years of marriage, Sophia discovered she was pregnant. She told Christopher in their grand kitchen, her hands trembling with excitement. At first, Christopher gazed at her with a blank expression. When the news registered, he forced a smile, knowing that was the expected reaction. "That's fantastic," he said. "We'll talk about this later. I have a conference call with Tokyo." He left her standing there, confusion building inside her. Though hurt, Sophia hoped he just needed time to adjust. After all, Christopher had never been a spontaneous man. Each milestone in his life was curated and meticulously planned, like scaling a mountain with a carefully drawn map. A baby had never been part of his short-term plan, yet the world saw only the illusions of their well-to-do life. On social media, Sophia's posts glowed with positivity. If she noticed Christopher's lukewarm reaction, she never hinted publicly. She was determined to become the best mother possible, even if she had to do it alone. Within the labyrinth of Christopher's grand estate, cracks were forming. The staff gossiped in hushed whispers about the estrangement they sensed between Christopher and Sophia. Maids remarked how Sophia often dined alone, her gaze lingering on the empty seat at the head of the table. The driver noticed how Christopher's schedule seldom included his wife. He was more likely to show up at upscale bars with clients than to come home for a quiet dinner. Sophia picked up on these signs, but attempted to stifle her anxieties. She spent her days preparing for the baby, reading every pregnancy book she could lay her hands on. She visited baby boutiques in Manhattan, selecting pastel-colored blankets and assembling furniture in the nursery. Christopher, for his part, signed off on every expense but displayed almost no personal involvement. But beneath that stoic exterior, Christopher battled internal conflicts. His business empire thrived as Redwood Investment Group kept surpassing quarterly predictions, causing the media to label him the Midas of Manhattan. Yet for every business victory, the idea of fatherhood felt like a weight in his chest, a trap tethering him to responsibilities he had never truly wanted. His nights out became more frequent. He found comfort in the high-end lounge circuits, swilling expensive whiskey, and making acquaintances with socialites who fed his ego. And that was where he met her, Vanessa Pierce. Vanessa was everything Christopher found tempting. She was dangerously ambitious, kept her secrets well, and appreciated the grandeur of his wealth. At 28, she had golden hair, an effortless charm, and a sharp wit. She'd grown up in Los Angeles among actors and producers, used to the adrenaline rush of big money and fame. But in Christopher, she saw more than a quick fling. She glimpsed a means to secure her own place among the elite. In their flirtatious exchanges, Christopher discovered a sense of emotional release. Vanessa didn't nag him about fatherhood or question his late hours. She wanted nothing but the luxurious amusements he could provide. Whenever he felt cornered by the responsibilities at home, he'd ring Vanessa. They'd dine at Michelin-star restaurants, check into exclusive penthouse suites, and indulge each other until dawn. Inevitably, rumors began to swirl. The staff at Redwood occasionally spotted Christopher in intimate moments with Vanessa, though they pretended not to see. Some co-workers gossiped in the break room about how Christopher was crossing lines that even a man of his power should not cross. And one person, in particular, decided to quietly gather evidence. Miriam White, a dedicated executive assistant who'd worked at Redwood for over a decade, had grown fond of Sophia through corporate events. She'd witnessed how kind Sophia was, how she cared to learn everyone's names, even the interns. And so, seeing Christopher's infidelity felt like watching a train wreck in slow motion. Though Miriam had no illusions that corporate loyalty extended to personal matters, her conscience gnawed at her. She collected bits of evidence, a late-night reservation at the Street, Regis, New York for Christopher and guest, paparazzi shots posted on social media, suspiciously titled receipts. She kept them in an encrypted folder. Why she did so, she wasn't yet sure. Perhaps she just needed a contingency plan. Perhaps she wanted to protect Sophia, or maybe she was waiting for the right moment to step in. Sophia's pregnancy advanced, and with it came the typical ailments: morning sickness, mood swings, fatigue. She reached out to Christopher, desperate for his support, but he remained emotionally distant. Around the time of her third trimester, she pleaded with him to attend a crucial ultrasound appointment. It was the day they could find out the baby's gender. He agreed, but on that morning, a last-minute emergency meeting at Redwood forced him to miss it. As Sophia lay in the clinic, the steady rhythm of the ultrasound machine filling the room, a tear slipped down her cheek. She was alone again, but she tried to stay strong and remind herself she could manage. The baby was a girl, and the doctor told her everything looked healthy. That evening, Christopher came home to a candle-lit dinner. Sophia, wanting to salvage their marriage and believing good news might pique his interest, announced the gender. She was having a daughter. She had even decided on a name, Eliana, meaning God has answered. However, Christopher's response chilled her. He raised an eyebrow, as though evaluating a middling investment. "A daughter, huh? Are you sure that's wise?" he scoffed. "Boys inherit the legacy more seamlessly, but I guess a daughter can be fine." His dismissive tone stabbed at her heart, and the conversation fizzled. Christopher retired to his study, pouring himself a whiskey instead of celebrating with his wife. Each passing day, Sophia felt the baby move within her. She placed headphones on her belly to play soft, classical music. She assembled a crib, folded tiny clothes, and read parenting blogs. She refused to let Christopher's attitude dampen her anticipation of motherhood. Still, a lingering sorrow gripped her. She saw other expectant mothers walking with their husbands, hand in hand, exchanging joyous whispers. She craved that sense of partnership, someone by her side who was as excited to share this journey. Instead, she had a distant husband who treated fatherhood like an unwanted detour. Vanessa was cunning. She knew that if she wanted Christopher's undivided attention, she needed to up the stakes. It wasn't enough to be the secret girlfriend. She wanted to be indispensable to Christopher. One night, over a private dinner in the VIP lounge of a swanky Manhattan club, Vanessa uttered the words that froze Christopher in place. "I'm pregnant." For a moment, Christopher's self-assured gaze faltered. He felt his stomach knot. Fear, shock, and a bizarre jolt of excitement flashed across his features. He quickly masked his reaction behind a guarded expression, but Vanessa had seen it. She deliberately sipped her champagne, yes. Champagne, pregnant or not, her priorities were different, and let the tension build. How? Christopher began, groping for the right question or exclamation. He realized how foolish that would sound. Obviously, he knew how. They were not always careful. He'd grown complacent, perhaps enthralled by the passion and the secrecy, never thinking about consequences. Vanessa put on her best impression of an accidental mother-to-be. She feigned concern, pursing her lips in what looked like a mixture of worry and sincerity. "I didn't plan this, Chris," she said softly, "but here we are." Christopher's mind spun. He already felt burdened by Sophia's pregnancy, resenting that his life was being upended. 2 babies on the way? That was unimaginable, but Vanessa was cunning. She dangled an alluring proposition. "I don't want to disrupt your life," she cooed, though every fiber of her being intended the opposite. "But I do need stability. If you can't provide that, maybe I should." She stopped short, implying that if Christopher wasn't going to support her, she might go looking for others who would. Or perhaps she implied she might make an even more drastic decision. The ambiguity scared Christopher more than any direct threat could have. "Let me think," Christopher said at last. Sweat prickled the back of his neck. He signaled for the waiter to bring more whiskey. That night, as Vanessa slept in his arms at their secret hotel suite, Christopher stared at the ceiling, formulating a plan. He had wanted none of this. Sure, the fling was exciting, but fatherhood, especially in a scenario like this, threatened everything he had worked for. He couldn't fathom humiliating headlines. "Millionaire financier fathers 2 babies with wife and mistress." He would become a tabloid punchline. Redwood Investment Group's conservative board members would question whether personal drama might affect his professional judgment. His carefully crafted facade of perfection would crumble. He reasoned that he needed to manage the situation strategically, the same way he managed business deals. He had to appease Vanessa, preserve Redwood's image, and limit the damage to his marriage. But as he scribbled potential scenarios onto the notepad in his mind, one fact stood out. He was in trouble. Sophia's delivery date approached. She continued to hold on to hope that Christopher would come around, that fatherhood might awaken a sense of duty or even love in him. But tension crackled in their household. Christopher, under immense pressure, wore a constant scowl. He had spoken to lawyers about discreetly drafting documents to protect his financial assets. He was in no rush to proclaim his mistress's pregnancy publicly, but he also wanted to make sure that if Vanessa's child was indeed his, he'd handle it on his terms. Finally, one afternoon, Christopher came home early, a rarity. Sophia, now visibly pregnant with Eliana, greeted him with a tender smile, hoping to share a precious moment. However, Christopher's features were grim. Without preamble, he launched into a speech about the baby's future. He didn't want to be a father. He had always planned on being childless for the foreseeable future, at least until Redwood reached certain benchmarks. A child, he argued, was detrimental to the expansions he aimed for. He even claimed it could hamper their social mobility, as if having a child was some medieval social stigma. "I never wanted this child," he said, voice icy. "This was your idea. You tricked me into fatherhood, didn't you?" Hearing these cruel words, Sophia felt her world tilt. "Tricked you?" she gasped. "Christopher, this baby is ours. It's not a business deal. It's our daughter. How can you be so callous?" He scoffed. "You wanted her, not me. And if you think I'm going to let a baby ruin my hard-earned empire, you're mistaken." Sophia burst into tears. She pressed a hand protectively over her belly, as though shielding her unborn child from the venom spewing from her father's mouth. This was the darkest side of Christopher she had ever seen, and it terrified her. Over the next couple of weeks, the tension escalated to a breaking point. Sophia demanded to know if Christopher was unfaithful, suspecting from subtle changes in his behavior that something was amiss. He deflected, gaslit her, and eventually raged that her hormones were making her paranoid. But the strain was too obvious. Late one night, as Sophia was folding baby clothes in the nursery, Christopher walked in and, in a clipped tone, told her he wanted a divorce. "I'll take care of you financially," he said, as though awarding her a consolation prize. "But I want no part of this child's life. Sign the documents. I'll be free, and you can do whatever you want." Sophia sank to her knees, tears streaming down her face. She pleaded with him to reconsider. But Christopher's mind was made up. To him, fatherhood was now an intolerable burden. Her heartbreak didn't register in his eyes. As far as he was concerned, the marriage was a piece of paper, an arrangement of convenience that had outlived its utility. He was no longer willing to keep up the facade. Sophia refused to sign the divorce papers. But with the stress piling up, she went into labor 2 weeks early. Christopher was actually out with Vanessa that night, somewhere in a private villa, trying to finalize how they would discreetly handle her pregnancy when a call from the hospital disrupted him. Sophia was in labor. Christopher, deep in conversation with Vanessa, hesitated. Maybe he could ignore the call, but something, maybe lingering guilt, maybe the voice of reason, made him pick up the phone and leave. Sophia's labor was complicated. Her anxiety and heartbreak left her weakened, and the doctors worried about both mother and child. In the stark, white hospital room, with bright lights illuminating everything, the rhythmic beeps of machines became the soundtrack to a crisis. Nurses and doctors rushed around as Sophia struggled through painful contractions. She kept asking for Christopher, wanting him beside her, perhaps longing for an emotional lifeline. When Christopher arrived, wearing an expensive tailored suit and reeking of whiskey, he looked out of place among the frantic medical staff. He saw the pain etched in Sophia's face, heard her muffled cries, and for a fleeting moment, he felt a pang of something that resembled empathy or regret. But it was fleeting. As soon as he realized how raw the situation was, how it meant stepping up, he recoiled internally. He withdrew to a corner of the room, reluctant to hold her hand or even speak soothing words. After hours of labor, Eliana was born, her first cries filling the hospital corridor. But instead of joy, the atmosphere was tense. Sophia was exhausted, tears and sweat streaming down her face. She cradled baby Eliana, who seemed so fragile and small. The infant's eyes, barely open, shone with the innocence of new life. Sophia's heart swelled with love and heartbreak at once, wondering how this precious child could be unwanted by her own father. Christopher looked at Eliana as if she were a stranger. He offered neither a smile nor a gentle touch. He turned to the doctor, briskly stating, "Make sure the bills go to my assistant." Then he approached Sophia, who was trembling with emotion. "This changes nothing," he hissed under his breath. "I want a divorce, and I don't want custody. Understand?" Sophia clutched Eliana tighter. She stared at Christopher with disbelief and sorrow, tears sliding down her cheeks. In that moment, she realized that the Christopher she had loved, the man she believed was hidden beneath layers of ambition, was truly gone, or perhaps he had never existed at all. Word of Sophia's ordeal spread among close friends and family, though the couple tried to keep it away from the tabloids. Christopher's lawyers moved quickly, drafting divorce papers that would tie up his financial obligations. Sophia was in a vulnerable state, physically weak from the grueling labor, emotionally shattered, and overshadowed by Christopher's merciless demands. He moved out almost immediately, taking up residence in a posh Manhattan penthouse for business reasons. But in truth, it was a place he shared with Vanessa whenever she was in town. On certain nights, he partied hard, drowning any stray guilt in expensive liquor. His empire soared to new heights. Redwood's success was unstoppable. Investors saw him as a ruthless visionary, though some in his inner circle suspected that personal turmoil was taking a toll on him. Everyone waited to see if the scandal would break, but Redwood's PR machine was adept at silence. So for a time, Christopher's public image remained largely untouched. Meanwhile, Sophia and her daughter Eliana were left to fend for themselves in that enormous mansion. Christopher covered the mortgage and basic living expenses, but he had no interest in seeing them. Sophia was determined to recover from heartbreak and focus on being a loving mother, but the weight of rejection pressed down on her like an endless night. She found solace in the nursery, singing lullabies to Eliana, watching the baby's tiny chest rise and fall. She reminded herself daily that no matter how badly Christopher treated them, Eliana would grow up knowing she was adored by at least one parent. Amid the gloom, a small light shone. Miriam White, Redwood's executive assistant, who had quietly gathered evidence of Christopher's infidelity, reached out to Sophia under the guise of delivering some legal documents. After handing over the papers, she gently inquired about Sophia's well-being. Over tea in the mansion's grand sitting room, Sophia poured out her heartbreak. Miriam, compassion growing within her, revealed that Christopher had been with Vanessa long before Sophia's pregnancy was announced. Sophia's eyes brimmed with tears, her suspicions were confirmed, and it only magnified her sorrow. Yet Miriam was kind, staying by Sophia's side, offering emotional support and forging a friendship that would ultimately become critical. As the months passed, Vanessa's belly grew. She maintained a public image of a carefree socialite, never hinting she was with child. Photographers occasionally captured her at nightclubs or private events, but her cleverly chosen outfits hid her pregnancy from the tabloid lens. Christopher financed doctors who made house calls, ensuring Vanessa avoided public hospitals that might leak information. He also arranged a discreet baby shower in a penthouse suite, inviting only a few of Vanessa's close acquaintances, those who were either on her payroll or had a vested interest in staying quiet. But there was one detail Vanessa conveniently omitted to Christopher. This wasn't her first pregnancy. Years ago, long before she met Christopher, Vanessa had found herself in a precarious relationship with a married film producer in Los Angeles. That affair had also resulted in a pregnancy. Fearing scandal and hoping to secure a payout, she had confronted the producer. He had refused to acknowledge paternity, going so far as to threaten her. With no path to secure her future in that scenario, Vanessa had faced a devastating choice, one that ended in heartbreak. While some rumored that she had an abortion, others whispered she had secretly placed the child in the care of a distant family member. The truth remained shadowy. Vanessa never discussed it. This past experience, however, hardened her. This time around, she was determined to leverage Christopher's power and wealth. She recognized that he was cornered, having left his wife and baby. He needed Vanessa to remain silent. She had him exactly where she wanted him, at least financially. But she also knew men like Christopher never fully yield their power. They only pretend to do so until they regain control. So she played the part of a devoted mistress, all the while making her own backup plans. She opened secret bank accounts, stashed hush money, and recorded their phone calls. In the event Christopher ever turned on her, she would have the evidence to bring him down. Still, a part of Vanessa worried about her unborn child. She wondered if she could actually be a mother this time without discarding or using the baby as a pawn. Late at night, she'd find herself gently cradling her belly, feeling the kicks and flutters, questioning the path she had chosen, but ambition always won out. Love or maternal instinct rarely factored into her decisions. This baby was a golden ticket, not a person. Christopher soon learned that divorcing Sophia had not liberated him from his troubles. The Redwood board members, noticing a marked shift in his demeanor, began to question him about his personal life. Tense negotiations with an international conglomerate faltered when Christopher lost his cool during a crucial meeting, insulting the other party's CEO. Investors grew cautious, uncertain if the empire rested on unstable ground. Rumors about an out-of-control personal life percolated through the financial world. Adding to his woes, he found Vanessa's demands increasingly insufferable. She complained about the secrecy, about how they couldn't travel freely without speculation. She questioned why he was dragging his feet on formalizing their relationship. Christopher was reluctant to jump from one wedding to another, still dealing with the legal red tape of his ongoing divorce. The more Vanessa pushed, the more Christopher felt trapped again. To escape, he plunged deeper into a cycle of nightlife escapades, lavish spending, and fleeting dalliances with other women, which only increased Vanessa's suspicion and fueled her wrath. One evening, Vanessa discovered a text on Christopher's phone from a new woman, a model he'd met at a Redwood-sponsored gala. Furious, Vanessa smashed a crystal vase in the penthouse living room. She screamed that he was cheating on her. Christopher retorted, "You were always just a side piece. Why wouldn't I have others?" The fight escalated, with both hurling insults that cut deep. Vanessa threatened to expose everything to the media, including the baby. Christopher dared her to try, believing his money and legal connections could bury any scandal she might unleash. At the height of the argument, Vanessa doubled over in pain. Her face contorted, and her anger morphed into panic as she realized she was having contractions too early. She was rushed to the hospital, Christopher following behind in a separate car. He arrived to find her sobbing, strapped to monitors that displayed an alarming pattern for the baby. In that moment, a swirl of conflicting emotions engulfed him: fear for the unborn child, guilt over the stress he had caused, and dread at the possibility of more public humiliation. Back at Redwood, Miriam White kept an eye on Christopher's activities, though her official duties barely grazed the personal scandal. She overheard phone calls, glimpsed confidential documents, and noted a sense of desperation creeping into Christopher's interactions with top executives. She also maintained her friendship with Sophia, who was rebuilding her life as a single mother. Sophia, with little choice, decided to sell the mansion. It felt like an empty palace haunted by sorrow. She moved to a smaller but cozy suburban house in Connecticut, using the proceeds from the sale to stabilize her finances and create a new environment for Eliana. Miriam helped Sophia find a reputable lawyer. Together they explored legal avenues for child support and for ensuring that Christopher couldn't sever ties without providing for Eliana's future. Though Christopher had no emotional interest in his daughter, the law offered some protections. Yet Sophia remained heartsick, longing for a stable family for Eliana, even if she knew that Christopher's heart was cold. One afternoon, Miriam discovered a series of suspicious bank transfers from Christopher's personal accounts to Vanessa's. The sums were staggering even for a millionaire. It was hush money. Miriam recognized the pattern and realized that the mistress was using the unborn baby as leverage. Worried about the potential fiasco, Redwood's legal team began to question the morality clause in Christopher's contract. If word leaked out, Redwood's reputation and profits could take a hit. The board might force Christopher's resignation. Sensing the precariousness of the situation, Miriam confronted Christopher in his private office late one evening. She found him slumped at his mahogany desk, tie loosened, hair disheveled, a half-empty bottle of bourbon next to him. He stared at his computer screen, where spreadsheets and stock charts glowed, neglected. "What do you want, Miriam?" he said, not bothering to mask the irritation in his voice. Miriam took a breath. "Sir, I'm here as a friend of Sophia. And, to be frank, as a friend of Redwood. You're about to lose everything if you keep this up." His eyes flashed anger, but behind it flickered a sense of defeat. "What do you know about my life?" he snapped. "I know enough," Miriam replied gently. "And I know you're better than this, or at least you used to be. The board is worried. Investors are worried. Vanessa is pregnant and blackmailing you, and you have a beautiful daughter you've never even held." Christopher's jaw clenched. An uncomfortable silence enveloped them. Miriam pressed on. "You need to handle these responsibilities like a man and not an arrogant child. Pay your dues to Sophia and your daughter, and if Vanessa's baby is really yours, be honest and deal with it. Running away or trying to buy your way out will backfire." He scoffed, but he didn't dismiss her. Perhaps a small part of him wanted advice, wanted an exit from the labyrinth he had created. After an excruciating pause, he said quietly, "What can I do, Miriam?" She reached into her bag, pulled out a folder. "These are the legal guidelines for your situation, from a friend of mine who's a lawyer. It's not going to be easy, but it'll show you the right steps. If you sign them and follow through, you can still salvage something, maybe not your marriage, but your relationship with your daughter and your future." Christopher stared at the folder, swallowing hard. He didn't pick it up. Miriam left it on his desk and walked out. Whether he took her advice or not, she had done what she could. The situation with Vanessa escalated to a climax when she gave birth prematurely, a stressful labor that put both her life and the baby's life at risk. Christopher, summoned to the hospital, arrived to a scene eerily reminiscent of Eliana's birth. Medical staff in frantic motion, blinking machines, the pungent smell of disinfectant. The difference was that Vanessa, delirious from pain, screamed at him the moment he stepped inside the delivery room. "I hate you. This is all your fault," she wailed, tears mingling with sweat. Christopher stood rigid, racked with conflicting emotions. When the baby, a boy, finally arrived, the doctors whisked him away to the neonatal intensive care unit. He was underweight, struggling to breathe properly. The doctor informed Christopher that the first 48 hours were critical. Vanessa, exhausted, drifted into a fretful sleep. Christopher stared through the glass of the NICU at this tiny, fragile life. He couldn't deny the pang of guilt stabbing his chest. Another child, a potential heir, fighting for his life. What had he become? Though he tried to fight it, tears pricked at the corners of Christopher's eyes. For the first time, he was forced to confront the consequences of his selfish actions in real time. Something broke inside him as he saw the baby, tubes snaking around his delicate limbs, monitors beeping incessantly. On a whim, he whispered to no one in particular, "Hang in there, kid." Vanessa, upon regaining some strength, refused to see Christopher. In a blind fury, she labeled him a monster, responsible for her stress and the baby's precarious condition. She threatened legal action, saying she'd go to the press if Christopher didn't immediately pay her an astronomical sum, guaranteeing the child's future. The old Christopher might have reacted with anger or intimidation, but standing in that hospital, confronting the harrowing reality of a premature baby, he felt something akin to an epiphany. He realized that money alone wouldn't fix this. No amount of hush money or legal intimidation could alter the baby's fragile state. Over the next few weeks, Christopher found himself torn between Redwood's demands, Vanessa's rants, and the silent resentment of the staff who saw a different side of him every day. The Redwood board, after noticing his dissent, demanded a private meeting. In that meeting, they told him, politely but firmly, that if he didn't get his personal affairs in order, they might be forced to reconsider his position. Christopher, though outraged, realized they were right. The company's reputation was at stake, and Redwood was bigger than one man. Desperate and shaken, Christopher reached out to Sophia. He called her late one night, his voice strained. She hesitated to answer when she saw his name on the caller ID, but curiosity overcame her. "Sophia," he began softly, "I need your help." She laughed bitterly. "My help? After you humiliated me, abandoned our baby, and demanded a divorce? What makes you think I'd give you the time of day?" "I'm sorry, Sophia," he murmured. "I know I can't undo the damage I've caused, but I think I've finally realized how wrong I've been. Our daughter, Eliana, how is she?" "Now you ask?" she retorted, tears brimming. "She's perfect, Christopher, but she'll never know her father's touch because you made it clear. You wanted nothing to do with her." He closed his eyes, guilt swirling in his gut. "I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but I need to see her. I want to try to be a father." Silence filled the line. For a moment, Christopher thought Sophia might have hung up. Then her voice trembled. "It's too late to say you want to be a father just because your life is falling apart. Maybe it's too late, but I'd still like to try." Days passed without Sophia offering a response. Yet eventually, her compassion, or perhaps her sense of justice for Eliana, compelled her to allow a brief meeting. Christopher visited their new home in Connecticut, his heart pounding as he stepped onto the modest front porch. He found Sophia dressed casually, her eyes wary. And then he saw Eliana, now a few months old, gurgling softly in a cradle. She had a tuft of dark hair and large brown eyes that mirrored his. Christopher's breath caught. For a second, he felt the kind of awe he'd felt once upon reaching the top of the Redwood building and staring at the city below only. Now, it was more profound, more raw. He reached out a trembling hand, brushing Eliana's tiny fingers. She reflexively gripped his thumb. The moment, delicate and unspoken, hammered into him the depth of what he had forsaken. Tears welled in Christopher's eyes. He turned to Sophia, who watched from a careful distance, arms folded. She said nothing, but her stern gaze spoke volumes. Words alone wouldn't fix this. Only genuine change would. Christopher's attempts to repair the damage were interrupted by yet another crisis. Vanessa, who had recovered from the birth, was now threatening to release scandalous information to a major tabloid. She had recordings of Christopher's phone calls where he referred to her pregnancy as a nuisance and made disparaging remarks about marriage. She was set to do a tell-all interview, replete with photos of him and her child in the NICU, painting him as a heartless adulterer. For Redwood, this was the last straw. The board placed Christopher on indefinite leave. Investors panicked, stocks dipped, and Redwood's PR team scrambled to contain the negative press. "I told you this might happen," Miriam said quietly, though it provided little comfort. The empire Christopher had built was beginning to crack under the weight of personal scandal. Vanessa, delighted by her newfound leverage, demanded a lump sum settlement that would set her and the baby up for life, tens of millions, or she'd keep talking. Christopher fought back, but each time he hesitated, Vanessa leaked another damaging detail. Tabloid covers splashed with headlines like Manhattan's Midas-turned monster, the scandal of Christopher Carlyle. The entire city gossiped about him. Redwood's partners, once flush with praise, turned their backs. Meanwhile, the baby boy, named Caleb, was gradually improving in the NICU. Vanessa posted a cryptic Instagram photo of a small hand covered in tubes with the caption, "Our little warrior, we're fighting this battle alone." Public sympathy rushed toward Vanessa and Caleb, painting Christopher as a villain. He was hemorrhaging respect, capital, and, ironically, the very freedom he had once prized. The chain of events spiraled quickly. Redwood's stock plummeted further when rumors spread that Christopher might be forcibly removed from the partnership. Feeling cornered, Christopher sold significant shares of Redwood to raise liquidity, but the market perceived it as a lack of confidence, leading to a downward spiral. Within a few weeks, Christopher faced margin calls and lost a considerable portion of his wealth in a wave of frenzied selling. The tabloids gleefully updated their stories. Is Carlyle's fortune melting away? Gossip columnists speculated about how a man who once embodied unstoppable ambition was now trapped in scandal, debt, and looming financial ruin. Simultaneously, Vanessa filed a paternity suit, demanding formal child support and co-guardianship, ensuring she had a legal claim to Christopher's estate. Despite everything, Christopher did not contest paternity. He submitted a DNA test to confirm that Caleb was indeed his son. The baby survived his premature struggles, but the medical bills mounted quickly. Vanessa threatened Christopher that if he couldn't pay for top-notch care, she'd sell her story to the highest bidder. It was the ultimate checkmate, leaving Christopher with no good moves. Sophia, witnessing the chaos from afar, felt conflicted. She had once loved Christopher. She had believed in him, forgiven him for ignoring her pregnancy, and endured his cruelty. Now, the mighty giant was collapsing under his own hubris. While a part of her sympathized nobody deserved the agony of losing everything so publicly, she also believed in the consequences of one's choices. He had sown these seeds through relentless selfishness. The harvest of shame and hardship was his to reap. Broke, humiliated, and uncertain of his future, Christopher turned to the only person who offered him genuine kindness in his darkest hour, Sophia. He knocked on her door one rainy afternoon, drenched, hair matted against his forehead. She opened the door, baby Eliana perched on her hip. "What do you want?" Sophia asked, her voice guarded. I have nowhere else to go," Christopher stammered, tears mixing with the rain on his cheeks. I lost the penthouse. Redwood is forcing me out. I know I have no right to ask, but can you let me in? Sophia's expression was a conflict of pity, anger, and residual tenderness. After a heavy pause, she stepped aside, allowing him entry. The house was modest, the faint smell of a home-cooked meal drifting from the kitchen. Christopher, once used to marble floors and gold fixtures, felt an odd comfort in the unassuming warmth of her living room. Over the next hours, he recounted his downfall. He told her about Redwood's board meeting, about Vanessa's blackmail, the hospital bills, and the unstoppable public scandal. Sophia listened quietly, only interjecting to remind him that actions have consequences. Eliana dozed in a small bassinet by the couch, occasionally stirring with soft coos. Christopher glanced at his daughter, heartbreak evident on his face. "I was a fool," he choked out. "I wish I could go back and fix everything. I'd do so many things differently. But it's too late, isn't it?" Sophia's lips tightened. She thought of the night she'd cried herself to sleep, pregnant and alone. She remembered the heartbreak of the hospital room, where he rejected their newborn. But she also saw how far he had fallen. Maybe he genuinely regretted it now. "Only time will tell," she said at last. "If you're truly sorry, show it. Don't just say it." With Redwood leadership severing ties, Christopher received a hefty severance that was a fraction of what he once controlled. It was enough to settle immediate debts and ensure a modest life, but nowhere near the opulence he once enjoyed. Meanwhile, Vanessa continued her pursuit of large settlements, but with Christopher's net worth in free fall, she found her payouts severely diminished. Furious, she shopped her story around to magazines and networks, but public interest waned as the cycle of scandals churned on. Eventually, Vanessa realized Christopher was no longer the golden goose. She accepted a scaled-down arrangement child support for Caleb and a confidentiality agreement to avoid further media exploitation. Sophia permitted Christopher to stay in the guest room for a short while, with strict boundaries. He was to be respectful of her space, help with Eliana, and remain honest about his financial dealings. She made no promises about rekindling their relationship, but she saw a man who was beginning to taste humility. Christopher's initial days were awkward. He didn't know how to change a diaper or calm a fussy baby. He'd never lived in such a simple house since childhood. Yet gradually, he adapted. Early mornings found him reading infant care books borrowed from the local library. He learned to hold Eliana gently, to cradle her when she cried, to rock her to sleep while humming lullabies. The first time Eliana reached for his face with tiny fingers, Christopher felt an inexplicable warmth bloom in his chest. For the first time in his life, he felt a love that transcended vanity or ambition. He still had to face the staggering reality of two children, Eliana, living under the same roof, and Caleb, whose existence was a messy entanglement of guilt and paternal responsibility. Though Vanessa forbade direct contact with the baby outside of hospital visits, she wanted to remain in control. Christopher found solace in occasionally seeing Caleb from behind the NICU glass. He paid child support and covered medical bills. If he resented it before, now he embraced it as part of penance, an attempt to right his monumental wrongs. One sunny afternoon, Christopher waited for Sophia in the living room while she fed Eliana. He cleared his throat nervously when she entered. "Sophia," he began, voice trembling, "I want to apologize. I'm sure I have before, but I need you to truly hear me. I know I can't erase your pain, but I need you to know how deeply ashamed I am." Sophia glanced at him, her expression guarded yet patient. He continued, "I wish I had treasured you when we had everything. I wish I had been by your side during the pregnancy, that I hadn't abandoned you and Eliana. No amount of money or words can undo the hurt, but I will spend the rest of my life trying to do better." Sophia exhaled. "Thank you for saying that." Time will tell if your actions match your words, but I appreciate your honesty." He reached out tentatively and took her hand. She let him, though her grip was not warm. "I don't expect you to forgive me, or to ever trust me again, but please, allow me to remain in Eliana's life. I want to be her father." In that moment, tears glistened in Sophia's eyes. She nodded. "Eliana deserves a father who will truly love her. We'll see." Months passed. Christopher found a new job in a smaller financial firm, working under someone else's leadership for the first time in years. Though humbling, it allowed him to pay the bills and build a more stable lifestyle. He continued living in Sophia's guest room, though he contributed as much as possible to household expenses. He prepared simple meals, took on chores, and learned the value of domestic responsibilities that he'd once considered trivial. In the quiet of late-night feedings and early morning baby giggles, Christopher discovered a fulfillment he had never known. It wasn't about deals or brand names or high-end suits. It was about the genuine joy radiating from Eliana when she recognized him, the gurgle of contentment she made in his arms. He found himself telling bedtime stories to her, recounting old myths and fables. As he looked into her bright eyes, he imagined a future where he would be there for every milestone: her first steps, her first words, her first day of school. And as for Caleb, Christopher began more formal arrangements to be involved in his life. Through lawyers, he and Vanessa negotiated partial custody agreements. Vanessa wasn't thrilled, but she recognized that Christopher, though financially diminished, remained the child's father and had rights. Occasionally, Christopher visited Caleb, now out of the NICU, but still requiring frequent checkups. He'd hold the baby, who had the same dark hair and subtle dimples as him, and feel both awe and remorse. He made a silent vow to never abandon Caleb, to ensure the boy never felt unloved or rejected. One day, as Christopher took a walk with Eliana in a stroller along a scenic neighborhood path, he spotted a familiar face. It was Miriam White, carrying groceries. She greeted him with a cautious smile, surprised to see him pushing a baby carriage in a quiet suburb instead of stepping out of a sleek limousine in Manhattan. "Miriam," he said, somewhat sheepishly, I owe you a debt. Thank you for guiding me, for telling me the truth when I needed to hear it." She nodded politely. "I'm glad you listened eventually. And how are you holding up?" He glanced at Eliana, who was babbling at a butterfly fluttering around. "I'm better, poorer than before, less powerful, but maybe that's a good thing. I'm learning how to be a father." Miriam studied him. "You seem different, happier even." He shrugged, tears almost welling in his eyes. "I lost everything I once thought mattered, but I gained this, my daughter. Maybe that's the real wealth I was missing." Miriam gave him a compassionate nod. "Perhaps you're finally on the right track." Christopher's birthday arrived, a day he used to celebrate with opulent parties in the city. This time, it was a small gathering in Sophia's living room. No fancy caterers, just a homemade cake topped with a single candle. Miriam dropped by with a small gift, a children's book for Eliana. And in a quiet act of acceptance, Sophia handed Christopher a wrapped box containing a new fatherhood journal, inscribed with the words, "To New Beginnings." Surrounded by the warm glow of simple lamps and the gentle laughter of a handful of new friends, Christopher closed his eyes to make a wish. In the past, he would have wished for bigger deals, higher profits, or more prestige. Now, he silently wished for Eliana and Caleb to feel loved every day of their lives, and for Sophia, whether she chose to remain a friend or something more, to find the happiness she deserved. When he blew out the candle, the small group clapped. Eliana gurgled and wiggled in excitement, reaching her chubby arms for him. He lifted her high, her giggles filling the modest room with a sound more precious than any applause he had ever received in a boardroom. Eventually, the tabloids moved on to fresher scandals. With Redwood stable under new leadership, Christopher became old news. Vanessa found another wealthy admirer, though Christopher remained vigilant about his responsibilities to Caleb. Sophia, still carrying the scars of betrayal, let Christopher stay in the guest room indefinitely, but made it clear their relationship was on probation. Perhaps, with time and consistent effort, they might rediscover the spark that once brought them together. For Christopher, life was now about progress, not perfection. Each day, he strove to be a better father, to show up fully in his children's lives, to provide for them in meaningful ways that extended beyond material luxuries. He attended therapy sessions, confronting the emotional wounds from his harsh upbringing and understanding how those experiences shaped his endless drive for power. He reflected on the mistakes that nearly cost him everything. Each revelation chipped away at his arrogance, leaving behind a more grounded man. Though it took immeasurable time and effort, Christopher found himself forging real connections with his children and, to some extent, with Sophia again. He realized the emptiness of chasing external achievements without nurturing genuine relationships. In the end, the greatest challenge of his life wasn't building Redwood or making billions. It was mending the relationships he had so callously broken. And so, Christopher Carlyle's story stands as a lesson that greed and pride can devour even the strongest empires. Once revered for his financial brilliance, he nearly destroyed the very foundation of his life when he denied his own flesh and blood. It took heartbreak, scandal, and a fall from grace for him to realize the irreplaceable value of love and family. Today, Christopher's wealth is no longer measured in bank accounts or stock portfolios, but in the soft laughter of his daughter Eliana and the determined spirit of his son Caleb. There are no mansions or flashy sports cars, just a man determined to be the father he once failed to be. A second chance at fatherhood, friendship, and maybe even love. If this story touched you, please like this video, share it with others, and subscribe to our channel for more stories that illuminate life's greatest lessons.